All rise, please, for the entrance of the warden into chamber.
Good morning, everyone. If you'd please join me for O Canada, followed by a moment of quiet contemplation. Okay, I'll turn to my clerk and look for a roll call. Please, Jonathan.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Warden. We have all members of council in attendance with a few exceptions. Councillor Dolan sends her regrets with alternate Councillor Waters in attendance. Councillor Hamlin sends her regrets with alternate Councillor Jeffrey in attendance. And Councillor Van Staveren sends his regrets with alternate Councillor Broderick in attendance. And you have your quorum.
Thank you, Jonathan. Boy, what a beautiful day for our first day back. So, and no excuses for the weather today, was there? So with that, I'll look for the approval of the agenda. Councillor Miskimins, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by alternate Councillor Waters, that the agenda for March 11th, 2025 meeting of County Council be approved.
Any questions rising from the agenda? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest, any member of council? If you find yourself in that situation later, please declare it at that time. We don't have any presentations or delegations. We have the consent agenda. Councillor Burkett, please.
Good morning, Your Worship. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Norcross, that the council communications and proclamations February 25th, 2025 to March the 10th, 2025 have been given due consideration be received.
Thank you. Any questions on the consent agenda? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Adoption of council minutes. Deputy Warden, please.
Good morning, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Laux, that the following council minutes be confirmed and adopted and Committee of the Whole reports be confirmed. County Council minutes of February 25th, 2025, Committee of the Whole report February 25th, 2025, and Committee of the Whole confidential report February 25th, 2025.
Any questions rising from the minutes? Not seeing any. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Presentations and considerations of the Committee of the Whole. So, Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, everyone. Committee of the Whole performance report for February 25th, 2025. The motion being that the performance management recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated February 25, 2025 be approved, including the confidential item. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Norcross. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Any items to be pulled? Not seeing any. All in favor? That is carried. Perfect. Councillor Measures, please.
Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, Council. Under Human Services, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Brian Smith, the Human Services recommendations contained within Committee of the Whole report dated February 25th, 2025 be approved.
Are there any items to be pulled from Human Services? Not seeing any. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And Councillor Miskimins on corporate, please.
Thank you, Warden. Through you, Committee of the Whole report, Corporate Services for February 25th, 2025. The resolution being that the Corporate Services recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated February 25th, 2025 be approved. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McClellan.
Any items to be pulled for further discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor? That is carried as well. Thank you. Considerations of special committee reports, we have none. Consideration of county officers' reports, none. Notice of which notice has been given, none, and no notices of motion and no closed session. So consideration of bills, we have none. So we're already on to announcements here. This is Transit Worker Appreciation Day. It takes place on March 18th. There's an annual opportunity for us to recognize the dedicated and hard work of many of the staff that brave the weather conditions and drive those buses and help bring our communities together. They are an important role and integral to our society. Now so many people rely on this, so remember to have a smile and a wave for those transit workers. Any other announcements? Well, that is a quick day then. Let me, though I think the day is going to get a lot longer here shortly. Confirmatory bylaw, Councillor Norcross, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, of course, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Burkett, that Bill number 7118-25 be enacted as a bylaw of the County of Simcoe.
All in favor? That is carried. And now looking for that the March 11, 2025 meeting of the Council be adjourned at 9:07. Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Snell. All in favor? That is carried. So I'd like to roll right into our Committee of the Whole because we will have a hard stop at 9:45 for the public meeting at 10. So if Judith, if you'd be kind enough to bring our city reps in. Okay, Jonathan, I'll call the meeting to order and I'll look for roll call, please.
Thank you, Warden. So in addition to the members of council in attendance, we're joined by the city representatives, Aurelia Councillor Durnford, Aurelia Mayor McIsaac, Barrie Councillor Nagusi, and Barrie Councillor Rietma are present. Aurelia Councillor Fallis, Barrie Councillor Hamilton, and Barrie Mayor Nuttall are absent, and you have your quorum. Thank you, Warden.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll look for approval of the agenda. Councillor Miskimins.
Thank you, Warden. Through you, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Snell, that the agenda for the March 11, 2025 meeting of the Committee of the Whole be approved.
Any questions on the agenda? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of council? Well, once again, if you find yourself in that situation at that time, please declare it. So we're rolling right into presentations, delegations, all sections. We have none, but performance management, Chair Evans, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning again, everybody. Moving on to our first item for today, item 5.1, CCW 2025-062. That item, CCW 2025-062, dated March 11th, 2025, regarding Matthews Innovation and Transportation Gallery Project be received. Can I ask for a mover, please? Councillor Locke, seconded by Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Any discussion on these items, Council? Seeing none, all those in favor? Those opposed, if any? Thank you very much. The motion's carried. Moving on to item 5.2, CCW 063, Museum Annual Activities Review. Actually, quite a good review. I know Kelly Swift-Jones is here somewhere today. If you have any questions, but 12 pages overviewed the whole year of museum activity. And one item that's kind of near and dear to me was the participation rate that we had for this skate trail. Over 24,000 people, if I'm correct on that, Kelly, partook in the trail. And as we know, as the kids were happy with the number of snow days this year, so are we in terms of the skating. I think it was 22 days we had this year versus last year was 13, I believe. So, I think we should start looking at making that artificial so we can get some more days in there. But great report. Concurrently, we didn't mention anything about Matthews, but that is ongoing with a potential planned completion date of May of 2025, so that'll be exciting as well. But great to see a lot of activity going on in the museum in spite of the challenges with the space and everything going with it. And again, really gratifying, and thank you to the people of the County of Simcoe for taking advantage of this great facility. So can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for this? Councillor McDonald and Councillor Fryer, thank you very much. Any discussion on this item? Any comments, questions? Okay, the item is that item CCW 025-063, dated March 11th, 2025, regarding the museum annual activities review for 2024 be received. All those in favor? Those opposed? Seeing none, the motion's carried. Thank you very much, and back to you, Warden. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Chair Measures, Human Services, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Here we are again with Human Services. This is item number 6 on our agenda. First item is the Early Learning and Child Care System. And the recommendation is CCW 2025-056. The GM, Fiaz Baguette, is available if there's any questions. Anybody have any questions on this item? Okay. Seeing none, I will move to the motion. I will look for a mover and seconder. And can I get Councillor Cox and Councillor Cabral? And the item is that item CCW 2025-056, dated March 11, 2025, regarding the 2025 licensed child care and early learning years system funding be received, and that the program strategies, guidelines, and approaches in conjunction with the 2025 service provider proposed funding allocations as generally outlined in item CCW 2025-056 be approved, and that staff maximize the 2025 provincial funding and redirect any year-end municipal savings to the Social Services Reserve to help offset the future year budget pressures. Any concerns? Seeing none, I'm prepared to call the motion. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That carries. Thank you. Moving on to item number 7, Long-Term Care Committee of Management. This is the report. GM Sinclair is available. CCW 2025-074. Does anybody have any questions about the Long-Term Care Service Accountability Report, or does the GM wish to speak? Okay. No. All right. Seeing none, then I will look for the mover in second. Jane, I can't tell. You're on or not? Yes, no? Okay. I just can't see her from where I'm sitting. Nevertheless, I'll look for a mover and seconder on this motion. So Mr. Fowler and Mr. Bell, thank you. And the item is that CCW 2025-074, dated March 11, 2025, regarding the Long-Term Care Service Accountability Agreement update be received, and that the Warden and County Clerk execute the extending letter substantively in the form attached to as Schedule 2 to item CCW 2025-074, and that the warden and county clerk execute the declaration of compliance for the corporation of the county of Simcoe as required of the long-term care service accountability agreement substantively in the form attached to Schedule 3 to item CCW 2025-074, and that the warden and county clerk be authorized to execute amendments to the agreement proposed by Ontario Health, subject to review of the General Manager of Health and Emergency Services related to the approved county programs or operations governed by the Long-Term Care Service Accountability Agreement. Clarity? Anybody need any clarity on that? Thank you. I'll call the motion. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. And we do have item 7.2, which is the multi-sector service accountability agreement update. Getting a lot of updates on agreements here today, folks. This is item CCW 2025-075. Also, GM Sinclair is available if there's any questions. Anybody have any questions on this report? Your worship, it's a very quiet house here today. I will look for a mover and seconder from the floor then. Let's see here. McDonald and Mr. Smith. Thank you. Let's see. This is item CCW 2025-075, dated March 11, 2025, regarding the multi-sector accountability agreement update be received, and that the warden and county clerk execute the extending letter substantively in the form attached as Schedule 2 to item CCW 2025-075. And that the warden and county clerk execute the annual declaration of compliance for the corporation of the county of Simcoe as required for the multi-sector service accountability agreement substantively in the form attached as Schedule 3 to item CCW 2025-075. And that the warden and county clerk be authorized to execute amendments to the agreement proposed by Ontario Health, subject to the review of the General Manager of Health and Emergency Services related to approved county programs or operations governed by the Multi-Sector Service Accountability Agreement. Anybody? Any comments? Thank you. I'll call the motion. All in favor? That also carries. Thank you very much. Okay, and we do have another quality improvement plan for the long-term care program. GM Sinclair is available to answer any questions on this. There's several schedules attached to this item. Does any member of the House have any questions in regards to this item? Yes, Councillor Cox.
Yep, sorry, through the chair. Ms. Sinclair, I was just wondering maybe if you could do a quick summary of this, because I think the public should understand what a quality improvement plan is and how dedicated, and the fact that the province requires it, so nursing homes all know, long-term care homes have to do this, because I think it's very important and interesting for anybody who either has someone in a long-term care home or is thinking about it or just needs to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. GM Sinclair?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The quality improvement plans are an annual requirement under the Excellent Care Act for all long-term care homes in the province of Ontario. And it requires each long-term care home to really focus on quality improvement of all of their programs and systems in the home. The quality improvement plans for this year have a key focus areas. So there's 4 key focus areas. One is on resident safety, one is on patient flow, on resident experience, and equity as well. So this requires the home, the entire leadership team and staff, as well as input from residents council, as well as input from family council, to look at what are the processes happening in the long-term care home, where are there areas for continued improvement, and engaging these different stakeholders. They develop a plan that must be reviewed by the governance of the long-term care home as well. So it's a very extensive program. It demands that long-term care homes really focus on quality improvement in their facilities, and it also requires that involvement of all stakeholders, including governance such as county council. So that's an overview. We do have Osa Clint Piggott, who is overseeing the process and led the development of this report. So, Ms. Clint Piggott, I'd look to you for any additional comments you might add.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Further to what Jane said, that it is a legislative process that all long-term care homes have to engage in. It is not a one and done, so to speak. We do start the process of developing the quality improvement plan in the 4th quarter of every year. So it is a 6-month process where we engage frontline staff, the leadership homes of the team, as well as staff, residents, and families to develop this plan. And once it's developed and approved at council here and submitted, we then work with those stakeholders to roll out that plan to make sure that it's implemented appropriately and tracked accordingly.
Thank you very much. I just thought that this is something that's important for a lot of people to know. I don't think everybody realizes that the degree of improvement, quality improvement that the homes now have. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor. Looking to the floor, is there any other questions or comments they'd have for our General Manager or further discussion on this item? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you very much, staff, for your contributions. I'll go to the motion, which is CCW 2025-075. Can I ask for the mover and seconder? I'm thinking Councillor Janet Durnford. Would you move that motion? Thank you very much. Is there a seconder, please? Mr. Fryer, thank you very much. The item is, am I reading the right one? No, I'm not. I just realized I'm not. It's 2025-076. That's the one I should be reading. Sorry. CCW 2025-076 dated March 11, 2025 regarding the long-term care quality improvement plans for the 2025-2026 cycle be received, and that the warden and clerk be authorized to sign the County of Simcoe's long-term care quality improvement plans narrative attached to this item as Schedule 1 for Georgian, Schedule 2 for Simcoe, Schedule 3 for Sunset, and Schedule 4 for Trillium. That's the motion. Is there any questions? Anything further? Then I'm prepared to call the motion. All those in favor? And that carries. Your Worship, item number 8 is the one that I like the best, which is always other matters for consideration in human services. Does anybody have any other items? Seeing none, I will turn the chair back to Your Worship.
Thank you, and I want to thank the city reps. You can tell our minds all focused on the public meeting today, so probably the quickest human services you ever sat through. But thank you for coming out, and I'll turn it over to Chair Miskimins for corporate services.
Thank you, Warden. We are on Section 9, Corporate Services for consent items. And we've got a couple of consent items regarding our Simcoe County Forest 2024 annual reports and the Forest Conservation Bylaw 2024 annual reports. We have GM Elliott here to answer any questions. Are there any questions from the floor regarding 9.1 CCW 2025-064? Councillor Cox.
Well, this is another one I thought was important because our forests are the gem of this county, and this review and overview of it, I know we have people watching at different times, and I just think it's important maybe if Rob, General Manager Elliott, could just give an overview of what's happened this past year. We've had some new lands and different things that are going on, just to give the public an idea of where we're at.
GM Elliott?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. There's so many details in this report. It's tough to pick and choose. I'll highlight a couple, and I might pass it over to our County Forester, Graham Davies, who's with us as well today. A couple of key highlights I'd like to acknowledge and recognize. This is the 102nd year of the county forest system, which is a significant milestone. Last year, the team oversaw the planting of over 22,000 new trees. We acquired more lands, and notably, we saw revenues of over $2.5 million on our harvest activity. So maybe Graham could augment that, because I'm sure I didn't do it justice. Thank you.
Good morning, Council, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure what I would highlight either. I think I could add a couple of things to Rob's summary. I think the first thing that I would perhaps start with, as you noted, it's the 102nd operating year, which again is quite exceptional when you think about municipal programs. In some ways, it's a steady as she goes report, continued growth, continued surplus in our budget, continued tree planting, and a continued investment in restoring the forest as well. I think it's important to note that a lot of what folks see out there, we are a very active working forest. We do sell a lot of timber, but we do so in such a way that's always planning for the future. It's about having a healthy forest down the road, and that all feeds into it. Continued quite extensive investments in invasive plant management in particular. It's always difficult for us to highlight in a report like this just how much work we do in trying to monitor those impacts, in measuring the impacts, and in constantly making decisions on how we move forward in trying to manage and mitigate those things. Very challenging to do it, to put it in a snapshot like this. But I think it's important to note that our forest is much more than timber harvesting. It's much more than the really incredible recreational uses that we see out there. On that note, our partnerships continue to be strong. We've got upwards of 700 kilometers of trails that are in place through agreements. There's a tremendous amount of volunteerism that contributes to the success of our system as well. A lot of partnerships, a lot of positive partnerships. We have very good relations with all those various users. Bring them together. We've got an annual meeting coming up quite shortly. But again, I think it's important to note that we continue to work to reinvest in making sure that our forests are healthy and productive moving forward as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I just think it's good for us and to let the public know of all the different things we do here and the good things our staff do. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cox, and couldn't agree more. Our forests are definitely one of our crown jewels. Councillor Burkett.
Thank you. Not through you, Chair, not to echo what everyone has said, but the almost 34,000 acres that's here for all our residents to use is absolutely amazing. But under you, Rob, but under your staff, Graham, and your staff, if anyone ever gets a chance to speak to Graham and his dedication to our forests and what he does to keep them safe, when you look around the world and the forest fires, and I asked Graham, like, he manages those forests for us, him and his team, and I can't thank you enough for everything you do. Like, it's such a gem. It doesn't matter where you drive through this county, and I like driving the back roads, there's a county forest. Like 34,000 acres for all of us to enjoy forever. Absolutely amazing. I tried on my calculator. I said $1 million for every 100 acres, 34. Well, the calculator doesn't calculate that many zeros. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burkett. Well said indeed. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Sora, I can't see you.
Thank you. Through the chair to GM Elliott, I was just wondering, there's a significant tree planting fund available through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities through the Green Municipal Fund, and I'm wondering if that's something we're eligible for or have considered in terms of the tree planting.
Thank you. I'll direct that over to our forester, if I might. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and that's a great question, and again, it's difficult to highlight some of those finer details in a report like this. We certainly do take advantage of funding opportunities. In fact, over the last quite a number of years now, almost all of our tree planting activity is actually funded, fully funded through partnerships, primarily with what is formerly Forest Ontario. It's now Forest Canada. And they have sort of leveraged the funding through the $2 billion tree program, and so we work through them instead of applying directly. But for many years now, almost all of our tree planting activity is actually fully funded. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, discussions on this? All right, seeing none, moved by Councillor Broderick and seconded by Councillor Cox, that the following consent items having been given due consideration be received. CCW 2025-064, Simcoe County Forest 2024 Annual Report, and CCW 2025-065, Forest Conservation Bylaw 2024 Annual Reports. Any further discussion on any of these? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is passed. We are on Section 10 of Corporate Services, Other Matters for Consideration. Are there any other matters for consideration at this time? Seeing none, thank you, Warden. I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I know we're moving along, but it was deliberate. We had a light agenda for today because we knew we had the public meeting. So, Chair Evans, if you want to take over performance management, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'd be happy to, of course. Are on item number 11, performance management with regards to finance. And today we revisit with Peter Fries, who's going to talk today about the County of Simcoe and the 2025 property tax policy update. So good to see you again, Peter, and please come down and make yourself comfortable. General Manager Wilcox, is there anything to say before Peter starts off? Floor is yours, sir, please.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. Nice to be back. I will be as efficient as possible. So we're for property tax, we're stuck in a non-reassessment era. We're kind of not just waiting for reassessment as we have been the last couple of years. We got to keep moving forward productively in the absence of it. We should actually be here today talking about our second reassessment since our last one. This would be wrapping up the last 4 years, talking about the next 4, but we're not. But there are some changes this year. In particular, we have a new property class that is mandatory or default called the aggregate extraction property class. It applies to gravel pits and quarries, which the county has a number of. That's probably the most material sort of external change or update that's happened this year. We are still dealing with growth. Growth still comes in. We can still make tax policy decisions at the local level or at the county level, where those are your county council's main decisions around tax ratios, things like that, and levy change, so we can decide how much money we want to spend. No reassessment. In tax policy, I often talk about how your decisions change the balance of taxation amongst taxpayers, but we also have that new class and some new rules which change the balance of taxation slightly this year there, so we'll look at that. So every year we do have to, before we start talking about 2025, we got to see what happened since last year when you, after I met with you and you passed your bylaw and you sent out tax bills, things changed. The base is constantly in flux, and we want to measure that. This year, growth remains extremely healthy in Simcoe County. It's strong. It's moving around geographically. It's not in the old spots. It's always different, obviously, because you can't build a new house over an old one. In terms of dollar values, you're pretty much bang on, a little lighter than last year. The percentage is down more than the dollars, and I do caution my clients to be careful about looking at the percentage from year to year, because as your base grows, the percentage is naturally going to get smaller. You can have the exact same growth every year. Your percentage is going to get smaller. So especially if you're looking ahead, look at the dollars, not the percentage, but it is extremely strong. I mean, you guys have been in the stratosphere for years. I have many clients that just hope for no loss. So you guys are in good shape. The growth happens, you share, the county shares a assessment base with the locals. So the growth is happening everywhere, geographically, around the county, and it fluctuates. As I say, it's not always in the same place. It moves as developments move and new subdivisions get serviced and things like that. So once we know your year end and we know what happened last year, we can establish your new base. Now, every year we begin with calculating last year's levy net of growth, so sort of December 31st, against the new assessment roll. And when we did that during reassessment, we obviously had shifts because the distribution was different. But we also have to use what are called start ratios or transition ratios. Now, because of your class and ratio positions, you've never had to deal with a transition ratio that was different than last year's actual. This is a bit unique for Simcoe County. You have a new class, and they've assigned a new transition ratio to it. Now, that class was wholly created out of industrial assessment. So they took some assessment, we'll look at that in a minute, out of the industrial class, and they set a new transition ratio for it. And that transition ratio is 18.63% lower than your industrial ratio. So those properties are going to be subject to a lower ratio in 2025 than they were taxed at in 2024. 18.63, where did that come from? That is an indiscriminate adjustment they made across the board, province-wide. I'm not sure where they came up with the number, but every single municipality with aggregate extraction, their transition ratio is 18.63% less than their industrial. So it's a tax cut for gravel pits. What's this mean? Well, when we recalculate what we call your notional, your starting revenue, your starting levy on the new roll, it shifts taxes. And in county dollars, it shifts $46,000 out of off of those properties now that they're in the aggregate extraction and across the county. That's $41,000 onto residential, 0.02. So it's not a massive catastrophic shift, but there is a shift there. So what do we do? Well, that ratio, this is just sort of a background slide. What the ratios do is they weight the assessment by class. So we treat $1 of farm at 0.25. We treat $1 of commercial and industrial at above 1. It's that weighting that we put on the assessment that changes the balance of taxation amongst class. And what happens here is that when we weight that down to the transition ratio of 0.97 and change, it makes, you can barely see it here. It doesn't have a material change, but you'll notice the other classes where we have farm at 5.2% of the assessment, it's carrying 1.34% of the tax, and then the higher classes like industrial, vice versa. The aggregate extraction is actually going to be down a bit. We'd have to show it to a couple decimal places to demonstrate that, but that's what ratios do. These are this is what they do in Simcoe County. But we'll talk about your authority to set ratios. And in addition to having a regulated transition ratio that is going to exist for year 1, so that's your starting point, we also have provincial ranges. Ranges of flexibility, or ranges of fairness as the province used to call them. And for that class, they set it at 0.60 to 1.1. Because your transition ratio falls below the range, County Council has the ability to keep that ratio higher, to set it at 1.1, which will mitigate the impact of the new class. You do not have to take that transition ratio because it is lower than your upper range of the range of flexibility. So in other words, the province assigned you one ratio, you don't have to go down that low, which is great. Most municipalities, I would say probably the overwhelming majority, are not in that position. You're able to mitigate the impact of this new class because of where you put your industrial ratio over time. You brought it down beginning in 2017, and you brought it down to match commercial, and you brought it down as you were experiencing industrial development. And it's paid off for you in a couple ways. I like lower ratios. Personally, I like them for the county of Simcoe a lot. I point to you as an example. And it's not an anti-business, but it's not a pro-business stance. It's a pro-stability. The less you're over-leveraging the most risky assessment, the more stable your residential base is, and the more stable your residential year-over-year changes are in reassessment, or when something like this happens. And in this case, your lower ratio is paying off. You're mitigating most of the impact of this new class. It's going to stay very similar to how it was taxed before if you take that upper limit of range of fairness. So rather than 46, we're modeling 19. And for your local area municipalities that have a higher concentration of the aggregate extraction, this option to move up to the top is even more important and will create even more stability. So the staff report recommends 1.1 for this new class, and I certainly wholeheartedly agree with that. So that's really the big sort of decision in this year's report. There's no reassessment. You do have municipal levy change. That always comes on top of any decision you make. We always add it on and measure it last. And theoretically, everybody shares in it equally on a percentage basis. This table here reports on your municipal levy change as it's being recommended with the recommended rates. My understanding was you were keeping to 3.625, and with that ratio changing, you kind of make the net year-end adjustment for everybody else staying to those numbers that were your target. What I like to point out, especially in Simcoe, because of the high rate of growth, is that we measure growth first, then we have an aggregate shift. We want to look, these are all different forces, and when you look at your bylaw last year and your bylaw this year, remember there's other things going on in between, particularly that growth. You wouldn't want to look from county bylaw to county bylaw and say, oh, the levy went up by, say, 10 or 11% or 5.9 overall. That's net of growth. If you're a residential taxpayer, business taxpayer in Simcoe County who didn't add or subtract from their property, their county taxes should change, by about 3.625, right where you're going to be. It's not going to be, when we look at Agila, not to pick at Agila, but it looks 11.65. There's taxpayers are not going up 11.65 in Agila, so that's important. You had new taxpayers come online there. So I always like to point that out. The last thing is more of an information item. It doesn't affect your bylaw for 2025. There's a new subclass available that was introduced, and it's a new subclass of the new multi-residential class, so it's the new multi-residential subclass. And what multi-residential is those are traditional apartment buildings. They are townhouse complexes. They could even be complexes of what look like single detached homes, but they're on one parcel, one ownership, one title, and they're tenanted. So it's, the easiest way to envision them are apartment buildings, but there are other things as well. The new multi-residential class was introduced way back in 2000, and it allowed municipalities that were taxing multi-res higher to give what was ostensibly or was supposed to be an incentive, so you could have a lower ratio. Simcoe County actually recommended adopting this at committee in 2017, but before council met again, the province had made it a default class, which so you adopted it, but you kind of didn't adopt it because the province beat you to the punch. And at that time, then you started moving your multi-res down to parity, which it's at now. So that would affect new properties that are built after that class comes into effect. And the new multi-res subclass is the same, only it would apply to anything to which a building permit was pulled after you chose to adopt it. So if you were to say, had have adopted it this morning at county council, the optional class, and I took out a building permit this afternoon for a multi-residential complex, it would be captured by the new multi-residential subclass. And county council could decide to give a discount to that subclass. It's supposed to be an incentive, but it is very unlikely. It is certainly a housing-friendly item, but nobody's going to build a multi-residential building because you have this subclass. That's not the motivating factors behind building multi-res. And you as a county and your housing corporation have built a number over the past few years, and you probably didn't consider a marginal tax adjustment. You can look at this. It is housing friendly, but there are a lot of considerations. One of the big ones is equity. You would be taxing a property built next year or the year after at a discounted rate compared to one that was built last year or the year before, and they might be identical or very similar buildings. And unlike what happened with the new multi-res, where you brought that multi-res down to make sure that there was no equity issue, you can't do that here. You can't equalize the multi-res to this new discounted subclass. You'd want to look at the numbers. That hasn't been done because it would be something you'd have to express an interest in investigating. This subclass is, again, it's housing friendly, but it's a bit of a lost leader. You wouldn't want to build it on the assumption or on the premise that it is going to build housing. That is quite unlikely, but it is out there. It was introduced, so if you wanted to look at it, you could. But that's the other tax policy change. Unlike the aggregate extraction, it doesn't have an immediate impact on 2025. So I've tried to be quick, hopefully not too quick. Happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Peter. Appreciate that. Council, any questions? Starting with Councillor Farrer, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I won't ask my annual question about MPAC and assessment correction, because we know that's not going to happen. I'm guessing before 2027. But I do want to, the multi-res that you just went through, I wouldn't mind if we just could maybe hear from staff in regards to that particular policy. I'm not really sure if it would be something that the treasurer would speak to, or general manager of treasury, or general manager of Fayez Bagat.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Councillor Fryer. General Manager Wilcox, you want to kick it off?
Thank you very much, Chair, through you. As Peter outlined, it's not something that we're recommending that we look for at this point in time. There's equity issues related to that we think are of a disadvantage at this point to look at. So maybe through the treasurer, is there anything else that you'd want to add there, Leland?
Through the chair, yes, we would look at, as you said, the equity issues, as well as analyze any future impacts that implementing that subclass would have on the taxation specifically, and of course on the impact of housing.
Just as follow-up, I'll just say, but it's something that we'll keep on our radar, just to see if there's some way to make it advantageous to us, but at this point, not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, questions? Peter, thanks for the presentation. I just said, Councillor Adu, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, through you. Peter, if you could just go back and explain a little bit of with the aggregate. We pulled that out of industrial. That was just a classification coming out of industrial. And, industrial's set at 1.19, and we're suggesting we go to 1.10 with the aggregate, which shifts the tax burden to the residential portion of 18,000, and then some other commercial has some burden there. Just curious as to why we didn't recommend staying with the industrial ratio of 1.19 versus 1.10. What was the reason behind shifting it to 1.10 and not staying with the industrial ratio at that time? Because all we've done is taken, like you say, the province just went and picked out this and said this is a new classification. But I'm not sure why we're going to give them a break and pass it on to the resident taxpayers. So curious of your thoughts.
Is it good, Peter?
Through you, Chair. So in terms of the county's decision, you don't have 119 as an option anymore. They moved your starting point to 0.9 and change, but there's an upper limit of 1.1. So 1.1 is the most you can have. It's your maximum ratio. So why did we do this? Well, I guess the gravel pits asked for it and wanted a tax break. I can't. Why we would tinker with something like this within a system we're not paying attention to, I can't answer that question.
Anything further, Councillor?
I just wonder if Trevor can answer that. Did the gravel pits ask for that? Yeah. Okay. No, I'm good with that. Going back to the multi-res. Councillor Fryer asked a question about it, and we're going to have multiple multi-res in our community. We have probably 5 to a dozen applications coming with multi-res. And I know you said that's not really an incentive to build multi-res, but any chance we can give an incentive for, because we certainly get asked with deferrals on DCs, things like that. My question is the county just not ready for that classification? 35% reduction in taxation helps us move those projects along a little faster. So your thoughts?
Through your council, that is certainly something the county could look at. It hasn't been examined yet. You're the county, so I can't speak for what you want to look at. My recommendation is don't count on it. Somebody building a property, it is certainly housing friendly and will help housing partners, new housing partners. But the 3 things that I would recommend you examine with care before you do it were listed on that slide. And 1 is consider the quantitative impacts. 2 is make sure the equity issues are on the table, that you know who is benefiting and who's not. And number 3 would be have realistic expectations of what it will do, and certainly will help a building. Will somebody jump out of the woods and say, I'm going to build one? I don't think so. So that was my point. I'll qualify my comment on that.
Thanks, Peter. Councillor Duke, anything further? Question, just building on Councillor Duke's question there about gravel pits. Given that a lot of these gravel pits are owned by same corporations throughout the province, is our 1.1 consistent with tax ratios in other regions? I'm thinking of Halton and Peel and places like that.
Chair, most municipalities are feeling the full 18.63% reduction because their industrial ratios were not in a position where it gave them any flexibility. Okay. And that is much heavier where they've over-relied on that assessment in the industrial.
Right.
They've taken a much bigger shift. Okay. So you're in very good.
Good. Thank you again. Any other further comments, questions? Great, thanks very much for the presentation, Peter. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
I will call the vote. Our warden is waving at me, so I will move forward. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Anderson and seconded by Councillor Norris. The motion is that item CCW-2025-078 dated March 11th, 2025 regarding property tax ratios and tax rates be received, and that subject to deliberations in the affirmative, the 2025 tax ratios and the tax rate reduction for 2025 is generally outlined in the subject item be approved, and that the necessary bylaw be presented to adopt the 2025 tax ratios and rates as generally outlined in item CCW 2025-078. Any further comments, questions before we go to the vote? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. And no other matters for consideration, I believe, at this time, Warden, so I'll pass back to you.
I do have a motion to committee of the whole recess into council composition for the public meeting, special council time at 10 o'clock. So moved by Councillor Fryer, second by Councillor Measure. All in favor? That is carried. You got an 8-minute break, folks. We'll be starting at 10 sharp. Thank you. Are live. We're going to open our public meeting, and first thing I'll start with is a roll call.
Thank you, Warden, and good morning again, everyone. We have all members of council in attendance with a few exceptions once again. Regrets from Councillor Dolan, Councillor Hamlin, and Councillor Van Staveren, with alternate councillors Waters, Jeffrey, and Broderick in attendance, and you have your quorum.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for an approval of the agenda, that the agenda for March 11th, 2025 Council Composition Public Meeting Special Council be approved. Moved by Deputy Warden Coughlin, second by Councillor Prost. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of council? Can't imagine, but if you find yourself in that situation later, please declare it at that time. So the purpose of the public meeting. This is a public meeting being held pursuant to Section 219(1) of the Municipal Act 2001, as amended, to seek input from residents on a potential new composition for County Council. On January 14, 2025, a resolution was passed by County Council, which directed staff to issue a notice of Council's intention to pass a bylaw to change the composition of County Council and hold a public meeting to consider this draft bylaw. Currently, Council is comprised of 32 members, including mayors and deputy mayors of each of the county's lower-tier municipalities. The bylaw proposes that County Council be reduced from the existing size to a 17-member council that would include only the mayors of the 16 lower-tier municipalities and a head of council. The head of council is currently appointed from among the members of council and therefore serves both on County Council and lower-tier council. The bylaw proposes to establish a head of council that serves exclusively on County Council for a 4-year term. The position would be appointed by County Council from among eligible electors who put their name forward. The bylaw also includes required updates to the existing weighted vote system. I'd ask the clerk to please provide confirmation on notice of Council's intention to pass the bylaw to change county composition, and notice of the public meeting has been given. Thank you. Jonathan?
All right, thank you, Warden. So I can confirm the notice of statutory public meeting advertisement for today's meeting was prepared on February 4th, 2025, and posted on the county's website on Thursday, February 6th, 2025 at www.simcoe.ca/notices. Notice set out the date, time, and location of the public meeting and how members of the public can participate by registering to speak in person or by providing written comments by 12 p.m. Monday, March 10th. The notice was sent to all members of council and shared with all member municipalities. A news advisory was issued by the county on February 10th, 2025, which was advertised by several local news and media outlets, including Midland Today, Barrie Today, FM 101, Milton Now, AureliaMatters.com, Innisfil Today, Collingwood Today, Bradford Today, the Creemore Echo, and the New Tecumseh Times. A second news advisory and reminder was issued by the county on March 6, 2025. On February 22nd, March 1st, and March 8th, 2025, the public meeting was advertised on the homepage of simcoe.com. And further, between March 3rd and 8th, the public meeting was advertised to residents through Metroland Media's simcoe.com newsletter. Finally, throughout the month of February and March, the public meeting was also advertised on social media, including Facebook and Instagram, reaching tens of thousands of people throughout the county. Finally, radio advertisements were run once a day for the 7 days leading up to this meeting on local radio stations. Thank you, Warden.
Thank you. So I have a consent agenda. Moving on to the consent agenda, there is a staff report here, item 51CO 2025-047, to indicate the purpose of the public meeting and provide some context for members of the public viewing Schedule 1 to the report, which is the draft bylaw. The report indicates that following today's public meeting, a finalized version of the draft bylaw will be brought back to the March 25th, 2025 County Council meeting for consideration. There will be an opportunity for this council to ask additional questions and debate the bylaw when it comes back. after which, if the bylaw is carried, now I'm going off script here, just to explain to the folks, it now proceeds to the triple majority. Passing the bylaw is the first phase of the triple majority. The second one, it gets sent to the lower tier municipalities. 9 of the 16 municipalities must support it. If 9 of the municipalities do not, and it's less, then the bylaw is lost. And there is no third phase of the bylaw. It's kind of like baseball. If you're out at second base, you don't get to run to third. So if it's carried by 9 or more of the local municipalities, and that's where the public too will have more input time, where they can make deputations or presentations at the local level to their local councillors when this is voted on. If it's carried by 9 or more municipalities, the public represented by those 9 or more municipalities must be more than 50% of the total population of Simcoe County. So that's how the of the electors in Simcoe County. So thank you for the correction. So that's where we're at today. Today we're going to listen to the input, and then the bylaw will come back at the end of the month after we've heard from everybody. So I will need that the following consent agenda item being given due consideration be received. Moved by Councillor Fowler, second by Councillor Evans. All in favor? That is carried. Opposed of any? Just receiving the consent. All right. So now the public meeting. Presentations from the public. We'll move to the presentation from the public. Members requesting to speak, you are required to pre-register with the Clerk's Department by 12 noon yesterday, as outlined in the notice of the meeting. We have, I believe, 2 now. One is withdrawn. So there are 2 speakers here today. We will start with the first registered speaker, Jonathan Scott. Please come down, and love to hear from you. Good to see you in the chamber again, Jonathan. Just a reminder to council, there'll be opportunity afterward to ask questions for clarification of the speaker, but it's not a debate. We're here to hear from the individuals, and if you have any questions for clarification, then please ask them at that time. Any debate that we have as councillors will take place on the 25th when the bylaw comes back. Jonathan, whenever you're ready, come on up to the podium. Welcome.
Good morning. It's interesting speaking from here. Colleagues, my name is Jonathan Scott. I'm a councillor in Bradford. The principle of representation by population is a cornerstone of Canadian democracy. The problem in Simcoe County is that there is not really that there are too many of you. The problem is that the votes of our residents are not equally valued. Right now, Bradford West Gwillimbury, with a population of 50,000, has the same 2 votes as municipalities of fewer than 10,000. That is not fair, that is not democratic, and that is not what effective representation means. The Supreme Court of Canada, in reference re provincial electoral boundaries in Saskatchewan, made clear that effective representation means ensuring relative parity of voting power. In other words, that one person's vote has equal or equivalent weight to another citizen's vote and is not limited simply based on geography. The court ruled that, quote, dilution of one citizen's vote as compared with another should not be countenanced. Unfortunately, that is what we see today with having 2 county councillors regardless of population and a weighted vote only applied in rare circumstances. Reducing representation numerically without addressing proportionality risks exacerbating the existing disparity. Bradford, in our case, would still be underrepresented. We would just now have fewer voices in the chamber. Our council has been clear in its position. Resolution 2023-204, which we passed unanimously, called for a review of Simcoe County's governance to ensure that representation is fair and reflective of population. That should be the focus of any governance reform. I respectfully urge County Council to focus on the core issue, ensuring every citizen's vote carries equal weight. That is the standard set out in Canadian law. That is what our residents deserve. I also sympathize with you. This is not an easy decision, and I understand there have been many attempts to change the composition of County Council over the years, and this is the one that has come the farthest. But I believe that we need to focus on the core issue, which is the weight and the authority given to every citizen's vote and the fundamental principles of Canadian democracy and Canadian law. That is the discussion you should be having over the coming weeks and months, in my opinion. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll get you just to hang around in case there's any questions for clarification. I'm not seeing any, so thank you, Mr. Scott. And I'm looking for a motion that the verbal submission from Jonathan Scott having been given due consideration by council and staff be received. Moved by Councillor Leduc, second by Councillor Sandu. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Next, I have Dave Ritchie. I'll get you to come on down, and welcome to the chamber again, Dave. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Ritchie.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Glad to be back, and thank you, Council, for this opportunity. I got to admit, I haven't got a big presentation. I guess the concern with us, I am actually the resident president of the Simcoe County Federation. And one of the duly concerns, and I'm going to be in conflict with Jonathan here, we see that we're looking for, or what we're asking with this change, is that we need good, fair governance at the county council. I've been on county council, and I appreciate the commitment and the work that you people do. And I cannot see, by shrinking this, that the workload's going to go away. I think that we need as many qualified and connected, smart people in these chambers to make good and justified decisions. As we move forward, I see the county's budget north of $800 million. And it's going to probably blow a hole in $1 billion shortly. And we need as many people in these chambers talking and being represented. Our concern is when you move the numbers down to 17, with the weighted vote in on it, we will lose the rural and agricultural component in these chambers. That's a big concern of ours. And I think we applaud what you've done, raising their remunerations to the councillors going forward to the next council. Long overdue, needed that. And I also applaud making the warden's job, which has been a full-time job for many years, picked from these chambers. And we appreciate what you've been doing. So, as I said, I'm not making a long speech here today, but I do think we need a good and fair, equitable approach to this whole thing. And shrinking the council, we have some serious concessions with that. So with that, Your Worship, I'm going to make this short and sweet, and thank you for your time and whatnot before Jonathan here throws me out.
Well, you won't be thrown out, sir. Do I have questions for the presenter? Councillor Measures, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Ritchie, for your presentation. Can I just ask you to clarify? I know you didn't write it down or anything, but you spoke about selecting the warden from this House. Can you just clarify what your comment was for that?
Well, it's always been the process to be able to elect a warden from amongst yourselves. I think that's a prerequisite to being warden. In order to be warden, you've got to have a background and a knowledge of what's going on in county. And that in itself, to be able to have it at large where anybody can go, I would have concerns having sit on council as to have people qualified that would know what really the county's about. If that's what you're looking for, Doug.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you, Your Worship.
And
thank
I got a motion that the verbal submission from Dave Ritchie, having been given due consideration by council and staff, be received. Moved by Councillor Measures, second by Councillor Cox. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you again, Dave. The next presenter has withdrawn, so we now just have the comments from the public. So the motion I have is that we move the comments from the public. Members of the public were permitted to provide written comments by 12 p.m. noon yesterday as outlined in the notice of meeting. We received 14 written comments prior to the deadline. Following the deadline, there was 2 further submissions that were received prior to this meeting, and they'll be added by the clerk to the minutes. They'll be added to the minutes after this meeting. So 16 in total. So I've got a motion that the following written comments from members of the public having been given due consideration by council and staff, be received. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor McKellen, second by Councillor Jeffrey. And a lot of good comments in there. So they were reviewed by council, a lot of good points. Take the time to reread it, I would suggest, prior to the next meeting. So all in favor of receiving those? That is carried. Thank you. So now we're on to adjournment. That there being nothing further, I would like to thank everyone for their participation in the public meeting. As a reminder, the finalized bylaw will be brought March 25th, 2025, regular meeting of County Council for consideration. The public meeting is now closed, and I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor McDonald, second by Councillor Laux. All in favor? That is carried. So does anybody feel the need for a break, or will we roll right back? I'll get my chairs back up here, and we'll roll right back into our committee of the whole. Oh, I guess the adjournment time was 10:16. Sorry about that, John, though I'm sure you got it. So while my chairs are getting set up again, I'll look for a motion that the committee of the whole reconvene at 10:16. Moved by Councillor Fowler, second by alternate Councillor Broderick. All in favor? That is carried. We are back in committee of the whole, and I think I left off with you. Was I still with you, Councillor? Yes. Oh, you'd finished. So, so the only thing I have left for council is, does there any need to go in camera? Does anybody feel the need to go into the closed session at this time? Yes, we do. So I have a motion that the committee of the whole resolve into closed session at 10:16 under the authority of the Municipal Act, Section 239(2)C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land. Section 239(2)D, labor relations or employee negotiations. Moved by Councillor Jeffrey, alternate Councillor Jeffrey, second by the Deputy Warden. All in favor? That is carried. So it'll take a few minutes to get set up. I guess we don't use the microphones again, correct? We don't need to because we're not a hybrid. Okay. So we've already had the motion to rise, correct? Yep. So then it's just the two motions. The direction in, first one is 13-1. It was moved by Councillor Norcross, second by Councillor Evans. The direction in camera and recommendations contained within confidential item CCW 2025-057 dated March 11, 2025 regarding a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition land be approved and voted upon in accordance with section 239(6)B of the Municipal Act. That was voted on and carried. Next, we had moved by Councillor Rawson, second by Councillor Norris, the direction in camera and recommendations contained within confidential item CCW 2025-072, dated March 11, 2025, regarding labor relations or employee negotiations be approved and voted upon in accordance with section 239(6)B of the Municipal Act, and that too was carried. And lastly, that the March 11, 2025 Committee of the Whole be adjourned at 10:27. Moved by Councillor Cox, second by Councillor Anderson. And all in favor? That is carried. The next scheduled meeting is, of course, Tuesday, March 25th, where our bylaw will come back. We have economic development. What are you thinking, Mr. Chair? 15 minutes? I'm hearing 10 minutes. Do I hear 9? Do I hear 9? 10 minutes we will start. So